Smoking the gram in this video. 9/11 was one of the best things that ever happened to Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was George W. Bush's vice president. He only became George W. Bush's vice president on the conditions of he have complete, unprecedented control of multiple government agencies and institutions, also on the conditions that he have more of a voice in regards to foreign policy. So therefore, this gave him complete, unprecedented oversight over agencies such as the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA to some degree. Dick Cheney did all this because he was coming from the military-industrial complex. He was the CEO of Halliburton, a military defense contracting company that had multiple billion to trillion-dollar contracts with the United States government. So he was the CEO of Halliburton once he was approached by George W. Bush to run as the VP, and he accepts the position on those terms, on those conditions, that he get all of that, everything that he wants. So this is his way of connecting the military-industrial complex with the deep state, because he was someone that had been in our government already before for many decades. He served in the Nixon administration as an advisor. He knew how the game was played and how to play it and how to exploit it and how to fuck it to the degree that he wanted to fuck it to make an immense amount of wealth for himself and his family, to enrich himself and his family in the long run, to do whatever it is that they want to do with that money, to just be wealthy people and splurge off the United States government from multiple defense contracts that he had with the United States government through Halliburton that he was the CEO of. And then he becomes the vice president of our country, overseeing all these government agencies, institutions that oversee foreign policy matters. So he connects the deep state and the military-industrial complex right there in one in unison, working. So then when 9/11 happens, Dick Cheney, he plays it like a war game. At that point, he's in control and orchestrating the whole entire thing from the White House. He's in control of everything that's happening. George W. Bush isn't even talking to any of the generals or anybody in terms of national security. It's all Dick Cheney. He's doing everything that he was wanting. He's orchestrating everything. It's at that point in time that Dick Cheney basically declares war on Iraq and Afghanistan, making that his primary mission to go into these countries, therefore labeling it terrorism as soon as they could and deeming them as the enemy, deeming them as people who want to break American imperialism and wealth, which is why they targeted to this symbol and beacon of wealth with the World Trade Center. And to some degree, there's validity to that. But at the same time, the United States has to look themselves in the mirror and ask, why did this truly happen? Why did it truly happen? I'll tell you why it happened. It's because America has always been an imperialist government, going into other countries, stealing their oil, killing them, using their resources, and doing whatever it is that we want, expanding, putting our military bases in these countries, putting our U.S. embassies in these countries, taking over and trying to spread our influence around the world, be the dominant policeman of the world. And in part doing that, there's money to be made. There's an immense amount of wealth to be made doing that. So Dick Cheney was a part of the process. He was a part of that type of industry. He was in the deep state initially, serving in the government for many, many years, many decades. Like I said, he served under the Nixon administration. Being in our government for quite some time, understanding how business is to be played, business as usual politics, business as usual imperialistic change. He understands everything from a deep state point of view. And then he's connected specifically through the military-industrial complex, being the CEO of Halliburton. Going to war and invading Iraq and Afghanistan, let George W. Bush tell it, because Saddam Hussein supposedly had weapons of mass destruction, which is why we invade these countries and go in there.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign. More than 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of naval and air bases to help with intelligence and logistics to the deployment of combat units. Every nation in this coalition has chosen to bear the duty and share the honor of serving in our common defense. To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. That trust is well placed. The enemies you confront will come to know your skill and bravery. The people you liberate will witness the honorable and decent spirit of the American military. In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality. Saddam Hussein has placed Iraqi troops and equipment in civilian areas, attempting to use innocent men, women, and children as shields for his own military, a final atrocity against his people. I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. A campaign on the harsh terrain of a nation as large as California could be longer and more difficult than some predict. And helping Iraqis achieve a united, stable, and free country will require our sustained commitment. We come to Iraq with respect for its citizens, for their great civilization, and for the religious faiths they practice. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people. I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon. Millions of Americans are praying with you for the safety of your loved ones and for the protection of the innocent. For your sacrifice, you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. And you can know that our forces will be coming home as soon as their work is done. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory. My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace.
When the terrorists, all the original terrorists from 9/11, they were originally from Saudi Arabia. So they don't even come from these countries that we're invading supposedly because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction there. Not even the person that the United States government deemed responsible for the terrorist attacks, but we still go in there because of that very reason. And when we have the original culprit many years in advance, George W. Bush had many opportunities to kill Osama bin Laden and take him out, but he chose not to because he wanted to prolong a war and go into these places to not only steal their resources, steal their oil, but we were already doing this before 9/11. Take that in mind. So don't get surprised when things like that happen, but we're still continuing to do that. We're doing it through war at this point. Hundreds of thousands of US soldiers dying for what? For what? What has been accomplished? These wars are equivalent to the Vietnam War. There's no purpose coming out of these wars. There's no meaning coming out of these wars. And yet we still are retreating and reducing our numbers pragmatically, but we're still there. Our presence is still there. And then when George W. Bush, when he's asked many years later, well, why did we go there? What was the reason for all this? He basically doesn't know what to say. And he basically is just lying like a fool. And then when they press him on why we were originally there from what he said, he starts just lying basically about the whole entire ordeal, the whole entire notion of why we were there. So during 9/11, Dick Cheney, he makes it a war game. He propels it through the media industrial complex and starts enacting and enabling the military industrial complex, virtually purposely exploiting the resources of the whole entire federal government, using it in ways in which it was useless and ineffective, doing all this with fighter jets, shooting other planes down that were headed for Washington, D.C., that had civilians on the plane, doing all this to just propel it through the media industrial complex, make it something that it really isn't in a roundabout way, get what he wants out of it, which is astronomical amounts of money and wealth. Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.